Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Data Faces podcast. I'm David Sweenor, founder of Tiny Tech Guides and your host for today's show. In this show, we're going to talk to the people who are actually making data analytics and AI work in the real world. What's exciting, what's messy, and what's coming next. Today, I'm super excited to welcome Catalina Herrera. She's Field Chief Data Officer at Dataiku. She brings deep experience helping organizations turn data and AI into real business value. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about AI and agents. So let's jump in. Catalina, welcome to Data Faces.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having me today. How are you doing?
I'm living the dream. Can't complain. I got my island shirt on. So, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you arrived at Dataiku, maybe a little bit of your background, and then tell us what you're up to over at Dataiku.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Colombian. For forever ago, I've been in the United States for over 25 years now. Wow, it sounds like a long time. I'm an electronic engineer by trade, and I have different master's degrees in computer science and engineer technology and data science and so on. So I've been in the data science, advanced analytics space for the last 20 plus years. And I've been very lucky because I've been, from different roles, I've been exposed to different technologies and ways to do things. And I'm also been part from different teams, you have different perspectives. So sometimes they been there, done that. I was the hands-on from that project or that process, and now it's the other side of the spectrum. No, it's like, okay, how are we going to maximize the opportunity there and properly connect the dots between the technology plus everything else that needs to happen for that to be successful? And that's kind of the last 10 plus years I've been consulting for the enterprise and basically deploying all of these use cases that are targeting machine learning, AI, and generally how to use better what we all have all over, which is data.
Okay, that's amazing. Yeah. And can you just tell us a little bit about Dataiku for people who may not be familiar with them? What does Dataiku do?
Yeah. So we call it the everyday AI platform or universal platform. And realistically, what it does is to smooth out the orchestration that needs to happen from all the different data assets and data outcomes that are part of these pipelines. So if you think about it from the most simple way, every time that you are using data, that data is coming from somewhere. And it needs to happen something to that data to actually be used. And that something can be very simple, descriptive analytics, ETL, or it can be a little more complex where you start thinking about predictive analytics, or it can be a little more complex when you add layers like generative AI on top of that and it becomes agentic. So ultimately, it's the orchestration that needs to happen across all of those data assets and data outcomes, plus the people, plus the experts, plus the SMEs and everything else that needs to be part of that multivariable model for this to be successful at the enterprise. And what is the meaning of that? So how do we deploy that in an enterprise environment, and how are we making it successful, and how are we going to measure that success? That at the end it matters tremendously. It's not just applying tech for the tech's sake. It's the so what. What are we doing with this, and how we are maximizing the opportunities? Yeah.
Okay, I love that. Well, before we dive into AI agents, and we have some interesting topics to discuss, I was stalking you on LinkedIn, and I noticed you were into AI music, and I like music as well. I've been tinkering around with it. Tell us a little bit about your experience with AI generated music.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do and one of my hobbies is I'm a DJ. I have a DJ station. I have a collection of drums, and again, I'm Colombian, and my Latin roots are very tangible in my musical aspect of it. So I have been, enjoying the technology from every single angle. And one of the angles is the human empowered by AI.
Right.
And what that means is that empowerment can come from the day-to-day enterprise deployment or me as a human in my daily basis. And that's one of the things that I like doing is music. So I discovered a couple of LLMs that are very domain specific musically.
Yep.
I have been prompting my own musical snips that I am now mixing. So
cool.
okay, now I am a DJ empowered by AI, and I am creating my own music. Yes, so it's been super fun. Plus the album cover and the design of the album cover,
Right.
all of that is Gen AI generated. So I talk about Gen AI. I need to test things and evaluate what really means and how we are the humans in the middle of that loop and what it means to be empowered by the technology, but at the same time maximizing the opportunity, which is very tangible right now for what's going on in the market.
Yeah, I totally love AI. It allows pretty much anybody to unlock their creativity, if you're an artist or you're into music or what have you, and it really allows people to do a lot more and be creative now. So let's talk about agents. There's a lot of I think agents, AI and agentic AI and AI agents, they're at like maximum hype cycle right now. And when a customer or prospect comes to you and say, hey, we need some agents, how do you turn that? Where do you start? How do you turn that vision into ROI versus a fancy demo?
That's a great question, David, and I think that's one of the hardest things that are going on out there right now. The hype and the boom of agents. The reality of it is that I personally don't think that a lot of people really understands what it is and what it brings to the table. So I'm not going to be very specific into the definition of it, but we are just going to think about it as a spectrum of capabilities, no? And realistically, where the value comes, because you ask something very important, which is, and so what? How do we turn that into an ROI or ROAI? How are we showing that this is moving any needle at all, right?
Sure.
So a couple of things back, if we think about the last 20 years or so, what has been going on in the industry is that we keep digitizing process and we have data now coming from all over the place, structure, unstructured, semi-structured. We keep asking questions to this data and we keep growing within that analytics journey. So for the last 20 years or so, we have been producing together within the enterprise use cases all of these assets that we can call intelligence, right? So the descriptive aspect of the data and the data story, the visualization, the dashboarding. Then we grabbed that and we actually kind of evolved a little bit into, how this looks like when it's predictive, for example. Or are we going to operationalize that prediction and so on? Now, the agentic layer happens when you combine all of these techniques that you are applying in terms of the question that you are asking to the data and the how you are asking that question, one machine learning algorithm versus the other one technique versus the other one. But at the end, everything goes within this umbrella, which is the AI umbrella, that is the collection of this data, outcomes. And then the agentic layer is using those assets to add intelligence to it, and that is the generative aspect of it. When you are orchestrating your descriptive assets, your predictive assets, your domain specific bots, for example, your retrieval augmented generation pipes and all of that now gets combined into that agentic flow. But when you say, okay, how do we start and how do we target this to be a successful project instead of another toy, right? And that's going on a lot in the field. I will say the higher the level on the way that you think about it, the better, number one. And number two, the multivariable problem that you have to consider, right? So first of all, you have to classify that use case into the four main, we call it the framework, which at the end is kind of 4Ds: delegation, description, discernment, and diligence. You need to know, first of all, the what and the why.
Yep.
What is it that you are trying to do, and who is going to be using this? What is the KPI that you are targeting to move, and how you're going to connect the dots on the needle that you are trying to move? The how to instruct, right?
Yep.
Who is going to be writing these prompts? What are the data constraints? Are we using any specific policy tied to this? Is this going to be audited at some point? Do we have to follow 15 different steps here? Where are we? No? How are we going to instruct this?
Right.
Then you have to include the how to judge this. How are you going to evaluate that whatever is going on within those guardrails, right? So
Yep.
the groundness, how you're gonna know that the latency, the cost, the safety, where are you including your golden data sets? How are you evaluating these overall, no? And then the fourth one, which is extremely important, is how are you gonna operate this, no? How you're gonna run this responsibly? Who needs to approve this? Who needs to monitor this, and how, what it means for you monitoring this, and pretty much everything that you need as a feedback for this to improve, no? And that's where we go back to this multivariable model. And I will say that the technology is not only there, but it has been there. So OpenAI released GPT 2 years ago, but we have OpenFace and open source LLM libraries available for years and years and years, no? But what changed, no, is the acceleration and the how is now demanded by the workforce, because now everybody is empowered by the GPTs of the world outside the enterprise, no? So that demand is pretty obvious. So once you define your 4Ds, now you have to be very aware that this is going to take some time. So you need to pretty much box it into your 30, 60, 90. What do I need to accomplish, right? So 30, I need an executive sponsor. I need to ensure that I have that use case defined, and I know that is part of what I call my critical use cases. Therefore, it's tied to a KPI. Therefore, it's tied to a team. I have a champion. I understand what it does. Do you have the data that you need to produce it? That's another thing that sometimes we don't think. And hey, no, you are missing half of the data, no? Who will approve the budget? And what is the timeline for that budget? No, all of those are 30 days, early stage questions. Then once you have that, you move to the 60 days, which is, okay, do I have a risk attached to this? What are the resources requirements and timelines estimates? What is the change management plan? Like, how I'm gonna follow some kind of a structure to ensure that we have a solid design going on and that we are following that process. And then you will have to deploy it. So your 90 days can be, what's your deliverable? Who is going to be using it in the field? What kind of questions are you expecting there? Who will provide a final approval? And what kind of documentation has to be part of it? And how are you going to provide that? What is your plan to move from the pilot deployment to the operational deployment? So do you have a way internally to move from your sandbox and your dev instances to your production operationalization instance, and what that means? Are you going to train a user? Are you going to provide a set of prompts for these users to know how to start with? Are you going to ensure that you have a way to collect all of these lessons learned and feedback? No? So again, the technology is there, and it's been there for a while now. Now is the awareness of every single variable that needs to be orchestrated for this to be successful within a framework that is going to allow these teams to be deployed at a production infrastructure with a field asking questions, being empowered by it, by really moving a needle, which is at the end how you tie this to the ROI that you asked at the beginning. No?
Right. That's super interesting. I do like that 4D framework. One of them, you mentioned data, and we've all heard it: bad data, bad agents, garbage in, garbage out, whatever phrase or you like to use. And classically, when we created predictive models, you sort of controlled everything. You'd build the model yourself. You knew sort of the data that went into the model for the most part. LLMs are really, in my mind, a totally different beast. So in terms of the data portion of it, what practices or patterns, make agents, reliable and measurable? What do you need to consider
Yeah.
from a data perspective?
Everything that you need to consider from the data perspective from forever ago. So you're right. Garbage in, garbage out, period. However, you have a layer there that is a very interesting layer, which is now you are thinking about an AI system. So you cannot come from your individuality, as in, I am building this one model and see how that one model is going to perform here. Now you have to think backwards. Now you have to think, I have an AI system that I need to maintain as up to date as possible for my consumers, to ensure that they have access and insights to what matters for them from the business aspect through this interface that can be agentic. No? So it can be a conversational interface, and behind the scenes you have an agent that is actually leveraging descriptive, predictive, generative assets, not which at the end is what really is happening. But every single data outcome that is part of what the agent is leveraging becomes like that one ingredient that has to be as good as possible by itself. So it goes back to your garbage in, garbage out, but at multiple levels, because now you have the super earliest stages, which is, oh, I did this first joint and I am bringing 15 silos and I am doing ETL, and now I have this table that has all of these columns that become information that the agent can leverage. Well, what is the traceability, transparency of the process that you follow to clean that data to ensure that you don't have garbage coming into the agent, right? So it goes back to the practices that we have been pitching for the last 20 years or so in the field for everybody that works with data, which is the process that you are following to ensure that you have the cleanest possible data has to be transparent. You have to have explainability. How do you decide between this model versus that model versus that model? And how do you tie that to your use case, but also to your own framework on responsible data outcome and what that means for you and for your teams? No? Mm-hmm. So the agent is not an isolated event. The agent is actually using all the descriptive, predictive assets that everybody has been generating as part of these flows. So now make the most out of it. But now more than ever, the garbage in, garbage out matters, and that's how you focus on what matters for you. So it goes back to techniques like retrieval augmented generation being very popular right now in the field. And why is that? Because you can still apply the intelligence that generative AI brings to the table, but is very domain specific. No, you are ensuring that the agent is becoming an expert into what you think it should be an expert into. So it becomes your helper. I see agents as digital interns. That's the way I see them.
Right.
The more you give them and the more you organize and structure the way that they think and the way that they leverage the assets that you are providing, the more it will help you. And that is your ROI, right? So it's how you are augmenting a lot of these enterprise processes and use cases and maintaining that lineage, transparency, explainability. Therefore, you know where the data is coming from. Therefore, you have access to how the agent made that decision and how it actually landed at the output that it landed. But transparency, it becomes key. Explainability becomes key. And the garbage in, garbage out has to follow your internal processes and frameworks to ensure that you are cleaning the data and that you are involving your domain experts and your SMEs as part of that. So you are validating that, in fact, you are using the best data that you can be using as part of that agentic flow.
Right, right. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense to me. And we're going to talk about governance in a second. But
Yeah.
before we get there, with these multi-agent systems, you mentioned something early on that was quite important. You got to pick the use case, and it's got to be tied to a KPI. So I love that framework.
Mhm,
But now, if my multi-agent system has 5 steps,
mhm,
these things are probabilistic. And
mhm,
even just like one query to like a chat GPT, sometimes it makes up stuff quite frequently. So when I got 5 of these chained together, isn't there more of a risk that it's going to go, off the reservation or go haywire? Like,
mhm.
like like the butterfly effect, it flaps its wings over here and you have a tornado or a hurricane on the other side of the world. Is that a real risk people should be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, these are non-deterministic models. They hallucinate that, and that's the aha moment where we can go both directions, right? So
Mhm.
this can be very well defined. We can be from the beginning very sure about what are the check boxes that we need to follow and how we're going to empower this team and where is that feedback as part of the flow, because what you are saying is fundamental, but it goes to everything. When we say keep the human in the loop, it's not a joke. So what it means to keep the human in the loop and what it means to keep the human in the loop with an agentic flow that can be non-deterministic and can hallucinate. And that goes back to your original goal. No? What is it that you are trying to accomplish? Who will be using this? Is this going to be a customer facing outcome? Who else needs to evaluate if that is an hallucination or not, and how you are going to maintain a feedback loop where you can do pretty much thumbs up, thumbs down, as you do with a Pandora model or with
Sure.
a Spotify model or with a Netflix model or so on. But the reality of it is that a lot of the initial pilots that we see successful in the field are defining that framework with internal use cases first before being customer facing. So there is a stage, right? And
Right.
there is also the keep in mind that different LLMs can provide different answers to the same question.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it becomes super, super important to being able to experiment and to have a stage during that process when you are defining that 30, 60, 90 pilot within that agent, where you properly define the type of prompts that you are targeting, but also you are comparing one LLM versus the other one versus the other one. Not only from the type of response that you are getting, but also from the cost that you are
Right.
getting.
Right.
So, what if you can have exactly the same response from this open source LLM that is not costing you all those tokens? And then you have the same answer here, but you have a 100K bill every month. So it's like, okay, how do I
Yeah.
define that? And that's part of your 30, 60, 90, no? So
Right.
great question, but human in the loop is more important now than ever with agentic and the opportunity of seeing behind the scenes. So Dataiku, for example, tracks every single log and interaction in terms of the agentic flows. So from the IT admin perspective, it's very easy to see the behind the scenes. Which teams are using which LLMs, how much is this costing me overall across the enterprise? Do I have anybody asking the question that they should not be asking? And we go into the governance central tower where you are overseeing everything that is happening behind the scenes, not only in cost, but also toxicity. Or do I have somebody asking questions that they should not be asking? Or how I am collecting the feedback from the field as part of this flow to allow the agent to get better and better at the answers that is generating now and what that means for the flow.
This is really interesting to me because, if we think about, the use case, and it sounds like, potentially you might need to narrow the aperture. So it's got to be like a very specific use case that you want to accomplish. So to keep it sort of in a line. It almost sounds like we're getting to deterministic code at that point. Like, do I need agent? Like how narrow is it? And what's the value of an agent? If it has to be that narrow. And then the other question I have is when you're making these decisions at scale, right? That's part of the value. Is it possible to have a human in a loop all the time, or do you sample? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, great questions. And we target, so what we see working in the field in terms of agentic deployments is where we target what we call the mission critical process, and across different verticals. So if you think about finance, for example, there are 3 or 4 use cases that historically have been proving ROI and value, and those are the best ones to target for an augmented process, which is where it becomes agentic. So let's think about a classic one, the predictive maintenance use case that everybody has been talking about for the last 20 years, and that can go to different verticals. So it can be in manufacturing, it can be supply chain, energy. So if I think about predictive maintenance, an example of how to augment that flow and make it agentic, I have wind turbines. So wind turbines, we know that they have to be maintained, that you can stop the engine and it stops production. You need to be as organized as possible, knowing what to maintain first. Classic predictive maintenance use case. What are the assets that you can use to augment the flow? From the descriptive side, you have historical information, sensor information, yada, yada, yada. All that comes from history, from sensor reads. It becomes an asset for the agent, descriptive asset. You can also have predictive models. It can be multiple, onshore, offshore, big turbine, small turbine, different engines, multiple predictive models. All right, now you have an additional data asset that you can use to augment that flow. Now add a little bit of generative AI on top and let the agent have access to everything that is historical, sensor, read, statistics, all of that intelligence. Then add the predictive intelligence, which is, okay, higher probability for this engine to fail if the sensors are reading A, B, or C, or D. And then the generative AI aspect of it can help you be one step ahead. So how do you augment that process? So instead of you digging into the data and trying to get your answers, ask the agent in a conversational user interface, hey, send the email to my maintenance crew and attach to the email the top 3 turbines they need to focus on next week, period. Okay. How is that doing that? Well, it's a micro automation job that can be sending the schedule automatically. It is intelligent because it is using all the data that you provided to make a decision, and the decision is based on predictive, based on historical, based on the sensor reads. I am defining these are the higher probability failure engines, therefore that's where we focus the crew. That is ROI right there. How many hours you saved in between in terms of all the data gathering assets, yada, yada, yada. Now you have a conversational interface that can be in the field for a crew that is right there ready to do the maintenance. And the email was received in that morning. So that is augmented that process. And then I have multiple examples across verticals. When you think about finance and anti-money laundering and all the fraud detection, augmented, be one step ahead, make it conversational, make it automatic, micro-automate a lot of those processes and make the flow even smoother and focus on your SMEs and your feedback and your transparency. Retail, you have demand forecasting and warehouse optimization, same, augmented. Healthcare, I have third-party data coming from all over on clinical trials and operations and patient matching, augmented. So the value here, when we talk about ROAI, it comes from your mission-critical processes. It comes from your own flows that you have been smoothing out for the last 10, 20 years or whatever. Now is the time to optimize that and to kill it in terms of ROAI when you augment those processes with the agentic layer on
Right.
top, right? So, but defining that framework for the first time is the hard part. But once you have it once, copy paste, different
That's
use
right.
case, copy paste, different use case, copy paste, different use case, and then kill it, right? And that is your ROI.
I thank you for providing that example. It was super helpful and specific. So I appreciate that. We've touched on governance a little bit, and so I want to talk a little bit about maybe when people think about this, what guardrails need to be put in place, from day one. What types of guardrails should people be thinking about?
Mm-hmm. And there are so many, but overall, I think you can group it into 4 or 5 main categories. The first one is lineage has to exist from end to end. Where is this coming from? Basic guardrails, as in, I know I have 15 fabs, therefore I have to have 15 categories within this column. I know sensors cannot read below 0. If I have below 0, all of this is cut off. Like basic guardrails from the beginning, which is the data that I have aligned with what I think I have, right? Okay. So that's kind of a station. Then you have to be able to include all your golden data sets. So you're going to focus on the evaluation before exposure aspect of it, right? So you have to be able to have hallucination checks. You have to experiment one LLM versus the other one, defining how much money are you going to spend in tokens per month if you have ridiculous queries, or if you can catch all of that to avoid that extra cost. So how are you going to include your golden data sets? Do you have ground truths? Do you have a history of answers that customer success has been replying for the last 20 years that you can use to train the agent? All of that has to be part of it. Then, do you have any internal process or a specific policy that you have to follow or to enforce in line as part of this deployment? No, PII detections, toxicity, the permissions of the tool, the rate limits. Do I have to cap somebody in the use of tokens for questions to the LLM?
Yeah, you don't want that oops surprise bill at the end of the month.
No. You want a kill switch.
That's right.
and you want to automate that as much as possible, because you don't want surprises. There are a lot of surprises so far in the field in terms of the bill from the tokens, no, on these LLMs. So it's something serious to consider. And then how you keep that human in control, no? What is the hand-off process to go from, and here is where I think about kind of 4 quadrants, no? The first quadrant, you have usually the personas that are bringing the data from the silos and doing a little bit of ETL description, cleaning, blah. Then you have the second quadrant that grabs that and push it, maybe data scientists and analysts that are exploring the predictive aspect of it. And that's usually the first 2 quadrants. But then you are ignoring completely the 3 and 4, which is how I'm going to deploy this, who needs to authorize it, who needs to sign off, how we're going to keep it precise. That is other thing when you say which other guardrails. Well, what it means to have a machine learning deployed in production that is within a precision threshold. And what happens if the model is drifting? Do I need to notify somebody? Do we need to retrain the model? Do we need to redeploy the model? Who needs to sign that off? That has to be part of your guardrails as well. And then the fourth one is who cares about the precision of that model, or who cares about that hallucination, or who cares about the responsible AI aspect that we are deploying into a production environment. And that usually involves teams that are from the legal side or from the other side that has nothing to do with IT, data science, data analyst, or anybody else. So from the beginning, my advice is you have to think outside your bubble. And it goes back to whatever I am generating in terms of this data asset is going to be part of a bigger pipeline is going to be part of a bigger AI system that is feeding these agentic flows, where we need to ensure that the agent has the cleanest possible data it can have, and that we understand exactly where the data is coming from, who did that, who did what to the data, and who will be receiving this, how in the field, and how we are going to operationalize it. No? So guardrails go from the super early concept of permissions, access to what, and lineage, and all of that, all the way to who is signing off this deployment, how many business initiatives do we have deployed in production that are leveraging agentic AI, how many are using these 5 LLMs versus these 2 that are open source, who are the owners of the projects, who are the stakeholders that care about drifting, accuracy, precision. So all of those are guardrails that you need to consider. And the more projects you deploy in production, the more important the way that you define those guardrails and that scalable framework becomes, right? So once you do it right, again, you do it right once, and then copy paste, and then you have other group of people working together towards the same goal. But the first time is crucial.
Right. Okay. Well, we're running short on time, so maybe just one more quick question for you.
Okay.
You mentioned copy paste. We have, agents or agentic systems per use case. Do we run the risk of repeating what we did with BI and have too many, like agent sprawl is what I'm thinking about? Do we have in BI, we all recognize everybody had their own report and none of them matched? I couldn't get it. Do we run that same risk with agents?
Yes. It is the same risk, but I think we have a couple of lessons learned from the previous decade, or I hope we do. So,
right.
As a community, because you're right. If you think about deploying one agent, it's not that hard. I mean, you have the different pieces. Again, the technology is there, and you can quick and easy be up and running with a little pilot and call it. But when you think about scaling this into production, you need to consider many other variables. And that includes your own culture, your own people, the way that your teams communicate to each other, the way that you are targeting being an innovation first group of people or a data-driven company. Well, you need to define what that means for you. But usually when you have such a diverse group of people trying to maximize what they can do with this data using this technology, you will need to organize them. And it can be just assets all over the place, because that is not going to be scalable. So acknowledging that this is a multivariable problem, acknowledging that the technology is a piece of it, but it's not the whole perspective, and that you also need to include that human intelligence in terms of the human in the loop and feedback, and guaranteeing that you do have your SMEs and your domain experts injected as part of that flow. You need to be very aware that you don't need to start from zero. Like we have been working on towards data outcomes and analytics for the last 20 years.
Sure.
Use those assets and don't start from zero, but use them in a way now that you understand that this is a little more complex in terms of the who's and the whys. So think outside your bubble. And that's the conversation that I have with my fellow data scientists and with my IT directors and admins, right? You care about your thing. Well, right now we need to care about empowering your people with the technology that is available. It's no longer democratized data. Now it's a matter of democratizing technology, but democratize technology on a way that is not gonna bite you back, and in a way that your teams can continue to scale so it's repeatable. So if you identified what are the variables that need to be part of that framework, then is where you can make it repeatable. So you are spot on, and we are crossing that risk. And teams in the field will have to burn before coming back one step and rethink about the framework they will use to deploy this in production. But the reality of it is that from the multi-variable model is getting more complex because you have more variables to orchestrate.
Right. Okay, this is fascinating. I could talk about this all day. I liked your message here. Think outside of your bubble, and empower people, democratizing technology. So, Catalina, I want to say thank you so much for this conversation. It's been amazing. What's the key message you want people to walk away with, and how can they get a hold of you?
This is the time. LinkedIn is a good place to get a hold of me, and I will say the message is, and this is the moment. This is the threshold. I mean, the time is now. The technology is there. The time is now. This is the opportunity for you to be the Netflix and not the Blockbuster. How are you going to ensure that you are going to maximize the opportunity that this brings for you and for your teams, and shift if you need to shift, change the ways that you are doing things if you have to. But this is the moment where if you do so, and if you do so right, it's going to be a very clear differentiator in terms of your competitive landscape. So the time is now.
Amazing. This is your moment. Seize the day. Well, thank you so much, Catalina. You've been an amazing guest, and I appreciate you sharing your practical hands-on experience with the listeners. So thank you.
Absolutely, David. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.